Okay, so this is creating assignments and tests and quizzes in Sakai. This will be led by me and facilitated by Amanda Alford. She's our other instructional designer. I'm one too, so she's going to handle the chat. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask verbally if that's okay with you. She'll try to answer things while I'm talking because sometimes I can't see them and do them at the same time. If you want to contact us with any questions after the session, our contact information is here, and you will get access to these slides in the recording when that is done. So this session is scheduled for 1 hour. We'll try to keep on pace and do it just a little bit less than an hour. If you need to use a different tab or different device to see and kind of follow some of the stuff we're doing, that's fine. And if you need in-depth help later, you can make a help ticket, and we're happy to help you with these things. So the learning objectives for this session is we're going to identify 3 content formats that are available in Sakai, because that content is in assessed. And then we're going to demonstrate how to add a single item with settings in an assignment, how to add a single quiz with settings in the test and quizzes tool, how to demonstrate adding a topic to the discussions tool, because these things are all the ones that are commonly used as assessments. Identify the 2 assessment tools that you could use in conjunction with those in Sakai, and then how to link all this stuff in a module so students can access it. So first, we're going to start with the content that you're going to be assessing on. So you need to get the content in Sakai, and then you can have the students access it, so then you can give them the test and quizzes and assignments and such. So this is a brief overview of what we covered in Sakai 101. So I just wanted to touch on it here. This won't be in-depth section right here. But when you add stuff to a module, you have these options in this box. So you can have text, the information you're going to tell them. You could have links to websites. You can embed a video. You can have PDFs. You can have slides. You can have all this stuff that holds the content that they see before they get to the assessment. And then when you have these assessments, you can have them linked directly in the module, so the students don't have to click around, which makes it easier for navigation. And in doing so, we're going to hit the new standards on the Quality Matters rubric, which is our rubric on how we assess whether an online class is up to standard or not. And there's a link here if you want to see what those specific standards are. That changed in July. So now, this point forward, all of our classes that we'd be building for online kind of have to meet those requirements. And one of the big changes was that in these courses, there are low stakes assessments and high stakes assessments. So things that are like embedded questions, a comment, something where you're doing a quick comprehension check. Those are kind of those low stakes that maybe you grade them, maybe you don't. They're really small, but those exist before you get to an actual formative assessment where there's some big points attached. So that's kind of where we're going with these things in course development from now on. I'm not going to show this video, but it will be available to you when you get these slides. But we did have a session in May where we had other ed tech tools, things that you could do assessment, you can do instruction, you can do more engagement, and those can be embedded in Sakai also. So they're kind of outside tools that you could use rather than the ones just in Sakai, but they can work in conjunction with your assessments in Sakai. So now we're going to get to the actual assessment or assignments tool. So when you add an assignment, you need to create it in the assignments tool. And so here's what the icon looks like, and then you will add. When you get a blank course, typically there is no assignments in there. And so this page will be kind of blank when you look at it. And then you're going to add individual items. So this screenshot at the bottom is an example of what an assignment entry would look like. So I have a title. It's applied to the entire site, which I'll explain in a second. This says draft, which says here, which means I have created an assignment that the instructor could see, but I haven't finalized it for the students to see. And that's a key point here that I'll come back to. There's the open and close dates and how many points it's worth. So I'm going to get more into what these pieces are, but the general steps to adding assignment is you go to assignments and add. You need to enter all the instructions that are very clear for the students, whatever you want them to do. Set the availability dates. So most instructors don't want a student to get to an assignment before a certain time that they've had time to see everything before. And then obviously a due date. So if they do take off points for grading, they can. And we'll get into some of these here in a few minutes, but there are types of submissions. There might be a turn it in where they have to, get a certain score for not having plagiarism or AI detection, and whether you're using a rubric and stuff. And then once you have posted this and you've set all these things, this draft will go away, this will change, and it will be available for students. So here's what some of those specific settings are. When you create that assignment and you type in all the instructions at the top, underneath there'll be a series of settings that you'll need to go through, and they're very granular, and you have a lot of power as an instructor to set these. So up here, which I didn't include in this screenshot, but down here, I was going to hand an attachment to this. So this is an example of one of our doctorate classes we're working on. There is kind of a template for them or a handout. So you can have all kinds of attachments. You could give them a template, you can give them a slide, you can give them an image, whatever they need to do this assignment, you can add them here. And those are files the students can download. You have to set things with the red asterisks. And so for this is the open and close date. And this except till is up to you. For most instructors, they want to accept things by the due date, and they're not going to give any extensions unless the student has some extenuating circumstances. You can set that ahead of time. So for instance, if you had a due date of March 31st, but you wanted to give them 2 days, a week, whatever, you technically could have that so that window was kind of open in this assignment. One thing that's very helpful to students, and it's not necessarily always used by instructors, but to check box these where it says send a reminder 24 hours before due date, because that sends an email through the Sakai to students to say, hey, this assignment and this course is coming due. And it's also helpful to add that date to the calendar in that Sakai course. So on the splash page, there's typically a calendar widget and has the links to all the assignments as a reminder. And so that's very helpful for students if you put all that stuff there and then they can't say they didn't know there was an assignment due. Typically, the times are starting at 8 a.m. So our face-to-face courses start at 8 a.m. on a Monday at the beginning of a semester. We typically do our online classes kind of the same way. So I like to have the assignments and the module all open at the same time, so they're just there. And because of our Sakai settings, you can only go by 5-minute increments. So the latest that we can have on a day is 11:55. And then when you open this tool, there's a granular slide bar. So things can be at midnight, but we have that 5-minute window because stuff may sync at midnight. When you go down a little bit further, so this box here was under the one we just saw, you can set the type of submission. So over here is a screenshot of the items that are available in Sakai, or the types of forms you can do in Sakai. And the most typical is attachments. You have a Word document, you have a PDF, you have something, and you have the actual file uploaded to Sakai. And what that means is wherever the student created it on their device, a copy is made and attached in Sakai. So there are 2 pieces that exist. When you have some things that are a different format, like inline is just really a small text box. So you wouldn't want to write a paper that way, but you might have some small response, a single sentence, or maybe a link. So if you had the link to a Google Doc, a OneDrive file, a video or something, that would be the one you'd want to use. And I say that even though there is a video submission, everything that's attached to Sakai becomes part of Sakai's storage. So in the past, way before COVID, we were having people upload video files in Sakai as assignments, and instructors were putting video files in the resources folder. And over time, some of those storage pieces got very, very large. And as an institution, we pay for storage. So we're hoping that people would utilize YouTube because we have Google accounts. And then the file problem is not ours anymore. We just need the link. And since Sakai now embeds YouTube videos right in a module, the file isn't there. It's really just a link that plays. So if students are creating video links and they put it in YouTube for that storage there, they just need the link and it would be an inline assignment. You can do groups. So if you had a group assignment that had to do a video or a paper or whatever, you could assign things to certain people, but the default will be everyone in a course. The submission is up to you. You could allow students to attach something and submit and pull it back and attach something else and resubmit as many times as you want until that due date. And so when you click this box here, you're going to have another panel of times and days if you wanted students to be able to do that. By default, it's not checked, so it's just one and submit, but that's up to you. And this is also instructor preference. How often do you want to be harassed by email that something has been submitted? It defaults to no notifications, but you may want to use that later in a term when you're coming up close to the end to be notified of anything that's coming in that you've not graded, so you could keep yourself on track. But typically, you don't want that at the beginning of the semester because you will get a notification every single time something is submitted. Later down the screen here on the assignment, you have to deal with grading. So the most common one is points, and that's kind of how the gradebook works, where you have all these numbers added together, but you do have some other options. You could do just a single letter grade. You could do a pass-fail, they got the points or not, or a check mark, which is typically used for something like a task. Like if they checked in with a field supervisor, they have a permission slip or something like that. You do have to, if you have points, it's going to make you choose how many points, and that is the total number possible that you're going to allow. That will factor into the grade book. The next pieces are up to you, but they are highly recommended. If you have an assignment that you want to use a rubric for, you can actually use a rubric that's built into Sakai, and you could see it here if it was attached. So some things like a written paper, you might have a standard rubric, your department may have one. We can build those in Sakai, so when you do use a rubric, when an instructor grades the assignment, they would just check the boxes as they appear on the rubric next to the assignment. So it's very helpful for instructors to grade quickly. You can also do it for presentations, video, whatever the students created. And then this is a key piece also. You can create an assignment and never actually get it to the grade book without this key piece. So if you do have something that you want numbers factored into a grade and you want to send to the grade book automatically, so you don't have to do that piece manually, you can do that. So in this setting, it's going to something that already exists. Sometimes there will be a new button here to create a new entry in the grade book, which is very helpful. And then the last piece is also optional. And there's an asterisk next to this because there's kind of a debate on how useful this is. If you have an assignment and you use peer assessment, this checkbox will actually open up a sub window where you put in due dates and instructions for that piece. What is actually happening is you created an assignment and a student has to submit by the due date you indicated. When that due date comes and passes, it now opens the next piece of the peer assessment where students can see everybody who submitted, and they can take one of their works and evaluate it and give feedback right in that tool. The only catch is if a student did not complete the initial assignment, they can't do the peer assessment either. So sometimes that's a double whammy on students who are behind. So Sakai and some other schools have actually suggested if you want to do a peer assessment of an assignment, that you make a discussion post with open and due dates and have the students post everything there so somebody can always come back and see those and do a peer assessment if they were late on the original assignment. So there is an asterisk to that one for that reason. So here is what that looks like. When I check that box from the one above, this will appear. You can dictate how many students they need to respond to. And so how this works is the students need to go back after the original assignment has closed into that assignment item and open the new panel and see all the submissions. It's up to you if you want to do anonymous evaluation, but you also need to teach students how to do constructive evaluation rather than just criticizing, and how many students can see their submissions. And then this piece down here is you need to write very specific instructions on how you want the students to do those peer assessments. But if the student didn't do the original assignment, they're also cut off from the peer review also. And so instructors who do peer reviews as a grade itself, that student loses 2 assignments worth of points. So when you have all these assignments in the assignment tool, then they start maybe looking messy to you. You can reorder them. You can sort them too. So you can, anything that's blue and underlined is a clickable item where you can sort by that thing. So if you wanted to sort by title, so it would be, assignment 1 or, module reflection or whatever you're naming it, it's going to sort by those words. If you name your assignments by module 1, module 2, so on, then it's kind of sorted for you. You could also sort by open and due date, which is helpful to see if you've set those dates right each semester, because sometimes that gets messy. You can also sort by if anything has something submitted, because there will be a little number slash here, so you know that there is some submission there, which is helpful when you don't have a notification for every single assignment that has been turned in. And so when you have an assignment, the link here indicates you can click on that assignment to open it. You could also click edit and these other items here to access it too. And then these symbols indicate something was put into this assignment also. So in this case, there is an attachment. So you'll be able to see those quickly, how many assignments have attachments to them, and a rubric, which is built in Sakai. Some instructors use a PDF rubric, which would look as an attachment. But if you have the Sakai rubric, it's a different icon, and it's very easy to use in the grading tool, because then you just click on theirs without having to write stuff on a paper and then put it into Sakai. And then over here is an indication of how many assignments have been turned in and how many do you need to grade. And so that'll be a running counter for you. There's another piece that is optional and has been changed since last year. We had the change about mid-July. We've always had Turnitin, and Turnitin is really just a tool that has collected 2 or 3 decades worth of formal papers and writings from college students all over the world. They have a huge repository. So when you have this turned on in your assignment and the student attaches a paper or written stuff, it is checked against all this database, and it's looking for stuff that is similar and has a very high indication that it was plagiarized or used from somewhere else. And if it's very word for word or similar, and it's going to give a score. You can use, you can exclude some of the stuff. So things that are a bibliography might be good to exclude because they might be using similar resources on certain subjects. If a student quoted somebody in their paper and they did it correctly, you don't want that to count against them. So you might want to exclude that also. This is integrated in Sakai because we pay for it. So it is a piece that goes into Sakai. And what that means is students are submitting in Sakai and not going out to the Turnitin website. So it's into Sakai, the students attach the paper, they may see that it's Turnitin, but they never have to go anywhere else. It checks it for a similarity. and gives a score, a percentage with a little flag that's red or green, depending on how much it was similar or not. And then the instructor can see that. And then the instructor can have a conversation with the student about your score is pretty high or it was pretty low, you did really well. Now there's a new setting that we also have, and only instructors will see it. There is artificial intelligence detection in this Turnitin subscription we have. So it's going to generate a score based on how much is similar to other items in the huge database. It's also going to give a score on how much it thinks that AI, Chat GPT or something wrote the text for the student. They're claiming right now that it's 98%, but they're not totally 100% that it's going to catch everything. So there is an asterisk next to this, because Turnitin is saying it's very good at detecting it, but you shouldn't hold students accountable to that one score and have, punishment. It's really a conversation starter about, well, if your paper's 75% generated by AI, is that acceptable or not? So it's something you'll have to deal with, and it's something you'll need to put in your syllabus about, do you have a comfort zone on how much AI you're willing to accept on the student paper? Because it's out there. And so you can't necessarily fail the student if they have a high score, but you need to look into, like, did they use it? How did they use it? Because sometimes it can have a false saying that it was AI detected when it was really a human detected. But that tool is going to become better the more it is used, and the more large language models are used to make it better. So when students, there is a new piece that students are going to have that is Turnitin, but it works a little bit differently. This is to help students when they are writing their papers before submission. So our IT department has turned on this extension for the Microsoft platform. There is one for Google, but we had to pick one platform, and we think most of our students may be using Microsoft. So when students are writing a Word document and they are in the OneDrive platform where they can do an online cloud-based document, this extension can be installed. And what it does is, as a student is writing, they can click this little button that's now in their Word toolbar that will help them get a similarity score so they can fix it before they get it to an actual Turnitin assignment. So for instance, if this student has generally in their progress of their work scoring a 23% similarity, and depending on the instructor, that may be too high. And it tells you where they find a similar set of text on the internet. So some things are the links, and you could go and see that, and they could try to rearrange their words so they don't plagiarize. So when they get the similarity score, this draft coach is actually coaching the students in creating their drafts, and they can get it to a point that they're comfortable with, and then they would actually go submit it in Sakai to a Turnitin assignment. So these kind of work together. When I said earlier that sometimes peer assessment may not be the best tool if a student didn't do the original assignment, discussions could be the backup. Discussions is also commonly a assessment tool or a graded activity in a lot of courses. And so what this is a tool that will have original post, and the responses are sort of nested below it, so it kind of structures what the text is. If you compare this to a live group chat where everything is just in a line and it's all different, this one is a much more structured with timestamps and indentations, and shows you who was replying to who. So in the discussions tool, before you start your semester, you need to publish the forum so it's accessible as a tool to students. This will say draft if it's not available. And here's where some instructors get messy with the discussions. In the discussions tool, this gray box here is like a bucket, and the things inside it are topics inside the bucket. You really only need one here with multiple items below it. if you create new forums underneath, you're really creating more gray buckets, and then you just have lots of listings in your discussions tool. So you really just need one. You could have different, categories of things, but for most instructors, they just need a general one, and they have a discussion for module 1 and module 2 and so on. In your discussions, because this is a text tool where you're talking and you can have links and you can put video and it's a little more interactive in a way, you want that to be a little more lively. This is not an assignments tool. It's not a quiz tool. What the topics you're creating, they need to be something that has debate and discussion. So some of the guidelines we give instructors are, you really want the students to talk to each other, and you're kind of facilitating that, but you need to give them a topic that they could have multiple answers, because nobody wants to read a discussion if the answers are all the same. So you wouldn't ask them a question of, what's 2 + 2, because all the answers are going to be the same. You would want to ask them something that has multiple viewpoints, and then have them back up their viewpoints with evidence, with links, with documents, and such in this conversation. You can set these like you do the assignments tool with an open and closed date. There's also the ability to make students post their own answer before they can read others, so they're less likely to come up with the same answer all the time. Because if you have students that could see everybody's post initially, and they don't have a lot to contribute, they might just mimic what other people have done, and so it's kind of becomes homogenous. So that's an instructor strategy that a lot of people use. And when you have this discussion, there is no grading piece to it until you create one. And so since this is a little bit of a different tool, you have to go to the grade book and create an item that says discussion 1 or discussion 2 or whatever, and set the dates there, and then go back and edit the discussion topic to go to that gradebook item. That way, when you are an instructor and you're grading, you go to discussion, there will be where you can enter a score, and it will go right into the gradebook. So they kind of work together. But you could also have discussions that have nothing to do with the gradebook. They're just there, such as the frequently asked discussions in the intro that are common, where it's not going to be tied to any kind of assessment. It's just there as an activity. So now let's get to tests and quizzes. You can create quizzes in the test and quizzes tool, and then you have a lot of settings. So when you add a new test, and everything that's in here is in draft form until you publish it, just like the assignments, you will see something like this where you get to add the question type. You have a lot of different types available in Sakai. Multiple choice and true or false are kind of the most common. But going back to the Quality Matters rubric, where you have kind of more deeper assessments that are kind of getting different modalities in different ways, we kind of want to see assessments that have different types of answers. Instead of all true, false, or all multiple choice, it's kind of assessing in different ways. And there are pros and cons to how you ask questions in these formats. And so as you keep adding questions to this thing, it's in draft form. But you can also create a bunch of questions in a pool and have only a limited number come into an actual assessment that goes to the students. And we do this often with textbook publishers. So when you create a pool, you can actually create a large number of questions and then make an exam only focus on, a certain number, and they would be randomized to combat cheating. So for this instance, when you go to question pools in the test and quizzes tool, you will add a new pool or import one if somebody's already created one in your department and you're going to share. So in this picture here is an example of 4 pools that I created for a class. And I created them by question type. So when I made my exam in the actual class, I could have sections of the quiz that were, this is multiple choice, this is true and false, this is short answer, and so on. So I kind of structured my assessment that way. And so I named them very by the course and the type. And then when I would click on this, I would see the questions that are in that pool. And we, usually had a dozen or more in that section. And so here's a screenshot of what it looks like when you click on that specific pool. So this was EP 522 multiple choice. Here's a screenshot of the first type of questions that I had and their points and when I created it. You can reorder the questions that are there if you wanted to use the whole part on your test. You can actually edit the test question right there. And you can add more here if this wasn't enough. Then when you go back to the exam that you're going to make for your specific class, and I'm going to add questions, and this time I'm going to add a part. And in this part, I'm going to add a random number from a pool. And so for this one, you can see that there was a pool generated this time. I'm going to get so many questions here, and that would be part of my section. I would repeat this process if I wanted to add, short answer, multiple choice, true or false, and I'm building my test that way. So then when I'm done with that test, I don't know what the questions are going to be on it. But when I publish it to the students, every student is going to get random questions in each section. So even if they're sitting side by side, in a face-to-face class, they're not quite getting the exact same test, but they are getting something that I built of the content. When you get to, you've built your test, whether you have multiple questions or you have parts from a random pool, there's some more settings that you can do, and these are all very granular. So here's the example of these accordion files that will be there. So when you click on one, there's settings that open and close. The first one is you can change the name of the quiz, and the instructions like you need this calculator, or you need, this book or whatever. Then you get the option to use the Respondus Lockdown browser. This is a tool that is also built into Sakai that we pay for, that will lock a student's device so they can't get to anything else on the internet or anything else on their computer. So it's really for face-to-face courses where an instructor can see everybody's device, but can't necessarily keep their eyes on all of those screens. So it would open a test, and that would be all the students could get to. So they would just have to work from memory. They would not be able to get to files downloaded to their device. They had secret notes. They can't go look up questions on Google. It's really for those face-to-face courses. You can use this in online classes, but with the amount of devices people have and cell phones and stuff, you can't really control that test environment. So locking one device does nothing for all the other devices that may be in the room. So it's really for a face-to-face testing situation. You have to set your due dates. You can also set how many times they could take a test or quiz. So if it is a low stakes quiz where there's a couple comprehension questions and you just need to get them right and they can do it as many times as they want, you would allow resubmissions up until a due date, just like you do in the assignments tool. Some bigger assessments that are high stakes, you might just want one submission. And you can set that if they take it multiple times, it can take either the last score or their highest score. So that's up to the instructor to decide. You can also set exceptions for specific students. So say you had a test day and somebody was absent or sick or whatever, and you wanted to give them a different testing time, you could apply it to just that student or that group of students. Or if you had students who have special needs and get extended time on test, you could also do so. One of the most important features is you want your grades or your scores of these tests to go right into the grade book and do that for you. So you don't have to create an item and you don't have to enter scores. It would just automatically do that. And every time the student takes the test again, if you have that setting and got a higher score, it will override it for you. So that's a key piece there. The other ones are kind of up to you. If you want students to have one question on the screen and they have to click to the next one to see each one, or you want all the questions on the screen, you could, or you could break it up by parts. So you have all the multiple questions on the screen. The next one will go to all the short answers and so on. That's up to you. You can also allow students to check mark individual questions that they can come back to and rethink about before they hit that final submit button. That's up to you. And you can show them how many points each question is. And if you want to write a little custom message about thank you for taking the test, or your work has been submitted, you can after the submission, and then you're ready to actually publish. So in the quizzes and test tool, just like the assignments tool, they are either in draft form, which means only the instructor can see them, or they're published, which means students can see them. And so when you are working on your exam and you don't have to do it all at one time, you can come back to this and have it. What it does is it keeps the draft all the time. When you publish, it creates a new entry that does not have draft. You can delete this one, but you should never delete a draft, especially if your course is a master course. When that master course content that's already been built and fully packaged is put into your Sakai shell, everything is in draft format. The instructor can see it, but students can't. So instructors typically have to go change the open and due dates to match their semester, but you need the draft form there because that's the master copy. And so if you delete this, that test is gone from your shell and you'll have to re-import it from somewhere else or recreate it by hand. When you publish an exam, which means you have all the settings and an open and due date, it may not be active because that due date has not arrived yet, or that open date hasn't. So in this case, I have the master copy, the final exam. I have published it with all the settings, but the day that that exam opens has not come yet. So this is inactive, but it is published. So that's a very distinguishable terms. And you don't necessarily have to do all of these settings. So I kind of put stars by the ones that are the most common ones. You have to have a title. You have to have a submission date. You definitely want it to go to the grade book because that's the whole point. And whether you want students to go back and review their answers before submit, just because that's a good practice. You can add images to quizzes, and this is helpful in math, engineering, and stuff like that. So when you have a question and you need to add some sort of image to it, you need to have that picture saved somewhere. So when you are doing your saving of pictures, you really need to save them in the resource folder of that course. Because in that resource folder, when you are editing your text, typically you have a blank box. But if you click the rich text editor, you get all these properties just like you do when you're editing text in a module. And one of those things is this image button. When you click this image button, it's going to ask you, where is this picture coming from? And if you have stuff in the server for that course in that resources folder, it's going to be very easy to access. You can change how it looks, the height or whatever it's going to be in this rich text box, just like you do in the text of your modules. And one of the things we're trying to push in the Office of e-learning is this alternative text. So in the accessibility requirements for people with low vision, there is usually hidden text on the picture that if you're using something like a screen reader, it will give you a short description of what you're seeing because you may not be able to see it very well. So in this instance, if you had a picture of a house and you needed to label what it was, a roof and a window and whatever, your alternative text would be read by a screen reader to someone with low vision, that this is an image of a house. It has so many windows and whatever, or, there's certain colors or however it's written. So it's there and we meet those accessibility standards because those are becoming more common. And if you wanted a caption to indicate where that image came from for copyright reasons, you could do so also. And when you have your question done, here's an example of the text that we put in. We use the rich text editor to enter an image of a supply and demand chart. And then I had my answer options below. So you could do this for different things and health diagrams, whatever. But you could, if you do this process with the resources folder, this system is pretty smooth. So now I'm going to get into the Respondus lockdown browser. This is really for face-to-face courses where you are proctoring exam and you can see the devices. This is something that they will need to set up, or students will need to set up really on the first day of class if you're using this to save time. They need to download something to their device for this to work. When you are putting in the Respondus Lockdown browser as an option in your test, that means your test is going to open with Respondus and lock the student's device. So when you have your test built, you can go back into the test, into the published copy, and now you're going to change the settings. And now you're going to go into the security and proctoring and require this browser. And that means that test version is now going to ask for Respondus when the student opens it. And so there are some steps that you'll want to walk the students through before they start this test. So it's easier to do it in the beginning of the term rather than right before the test for time. So when you have students, you want to walk them through this setup. They need to log into Sakai and access that test that you've created that already has the Respondus setting to it. There is something that they're going to have to download to their device for that first time. And then when they launch it from their device, a PC or Mac, what it's going to do, it's going to close everything on the computer that's not necessary. It'll pretty much just keep the browser open. Then it's going to go to the login page, and students go back into Sakai, and they're going to go to their course in that test, and then it'll be ready to go. Once they've done that initial download and launched it from there, when they do feature test, they just need to start at step 3 and go on. It'll just be from you launch the tool, you go back into Sakai, and you go to your test. But it does take a little bit of time for that to set up, so we recommend you do that ahead of time. And I mentioned exceptions earlier, and what this is if you have someone who cannot take the test during the time that it was set for everybody else, you can give them an exception. You can do it for individuals, or you can do groups if you have groups of students set up. So you have some that might need extended time and they're in a group, and this is an easy setup that you can always give them for these. You have to give the new time to open and close, and whether you're going to have a time limit or not, and add this to that test. So this is changing that published test with these settings, and they will carry over if you copy your shell course from semester to semester, if you have this saved in there. Now, when you publish a quiz, I said sometimes you need to change it after you've done so. When you publish the quiz and you need to change it, you've got to pull it back from student access. What this means is you're redacting it. And when you click on a test that has been published and you go to edit it, you're going to get a warning window. And in this warning window, it's going to ask you, hey, this is taking it away from students, and you will need to republish for the students to get to it. And basically, it's going to create this little symbol here that says, hey, this has been redacted. Students cannot get to it, and it may not be the version that you want. You'll need to edit the draft again. So we get a lot of tickets from instructors who changed something in their test. They were missing a question, wanted to add one, whatever, and then they want to change it right before the test, but they forget they have to republish and go through those steps again. So once you have redacted a test, that's kind of an old copy and you don't need it anymore. That is one that you should be able to delete, but never delete the draft because that's your master copy. So this is a common issue that we have some instructors do. So you have built assignments, you built quizzes, you've done all these settings, you have the content. Now you need to manage it long term. When you have your assessments and all the activities built, you need the students to be able to get to them easily. So when you are inside a module, one of the ways is to put a link. And even though they can always get to it on the tools on the left side, we want to create that accessibility that makes it easy to navigate. So we kind of want all the stuff in a module right in that module without having to go click here and there all the time. So when you have your text box, you have this assignment, instructions, the content, whatever, you want to add a link. When you click the little plus button, here you can embed the link to an assignment, a quiz, or a forum. And that way it looks like here where you have something, you have the description, the instructions, and then there's a direct link that will take the students right where they want to go. It's also helpful if you have similarly named assignments that they're going to this one first. And then the due dates, whenever you edit them in the assignments or quizzes or discussions tool, it will update the link here. So you can see that there is a date and time here. That is because I've changed it in the tool, and it will show in the module the same way. I mentioned calendar before, but I want to reiterate it because it's very helpful to students that when you put your activities on the calendar of your module or your Sakai, students can see it, because on the splash page of our Sakai and our standard format template, the calendar is a widget right there. And so everything that's due, everything that's coming up. So here's an example of there's a deadline coming up on the calendar for somebody. It's very helpful for students and helps with their time management. It also helps you as an instructor if you notice you had the wrong date on something because the calendar looked weird, and you can go back and fix it. So it's kind of like a double checking for yourself. There is a legend for the calendar in Sakai. So there's these things that you can kind of add that are different. You know, test and stuff like that kind of have their consistent icon, but you could put other things on the calendar if you want to, because it's very useful for everyone. If you want to learn more advanced Sakai tools, we do have stuff on our training page. We're also doing additional sessions. So next Tuesday is rubrics in Sakai, because I've mentioned those a lot. They're very easy to grade with. And then we'll get deeper into the grade book, because now you have all these pieces built. We also have additional courses in Sakai if you wanted to start building a class from scratch. And so we do have some of these courses that are available to you, because there's a lot of things going in. And if we're building future courses, this will help the whole process. And if you need any help with Sakai, there is a help ticket on the homepage of Sakai. You can ask us questions if you need help with building a test or assignment or putting in links or whatever. We're happy to help you. We check tickets every day, all year long, although weekends may take a little bit longer. And just if you need any help, just ask. So I went a little fast. Is there any questions in the chat, Amanda? No? We finished a little bit early. It's time to go to lunch, and we hope to see you at the next session.